Broadcasting live from the Business Radio X studios in Phoenix, Arizona, it's time for Phoenix Business Radio, spotlighting the city's best businesses and the people who lead them.
Welcome to Arizona Good Business Radio, connecting leaders together to have conversations about building strong local communities through doing good business. I'm your host, Thomas Barr, Executive Director of Local First Arizona, a statewide organization advocating for and celebrating locally owned businesses. We are the largest local business coalition in North America and raise awareness of the benefits of building a strong local economy. Our hopes today are to inspire more companies to do good business by highlighting local companies that are building a better Arizona. Today, I'm joined by two incredible gentlemen. First, Sentari Minor, a social impact advocate, passionate relationship builder. He is the regional director of Gen Next and oversees the development and engagement of accomplished and purposeful local leaders to ultimately drive generational change. I've known Sentari for maybe 6 or 7 years. Welcome, sir.
Far too long. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Second is George Grombacher, his partner in crime, a 20-year finance industry veteran. I'm so sorry. Podcaster, writer, and sought-after speaker. George is working to help people lead happier, more contented lives. He launched Money Alignment Academy after spending 10 years with a Fortune 100 company. We're going to hear all about that. Welcome, George.
Thank you.
So I want to start the show by saying that before we bring our guests on, we always reach out to them before and ask them to send us just some information about them because we want to promote the show after and all of that. And we also ask, are there any SEO keywords we should plug into the show so that we can promote it afterwards? Like, what are people going to search online?
Yeah.
And George
sent
us 3 words.
Oh, God.
Awesome, cool, and winning.
There you go. Okay, that's actually fair. That's not where I thought this was going, but perfect. That's perfect.
So if that's a preface for how this show is going to go today, I just want to lay that out there to start with.
If I could somehow be the number one person that popped up when somebody Googled or did whatever, awesome.
That is a goal we're working
Winning.
on.
On Google
Cool.
Images, just your face.
Just name. Yeah. And, yeah. Well, I don't think there's anything else to be said about that.
Well, I would love if this show popped up as awesome afterwards.
Yes.
So
we'll make it happen.
Let's go for it. But I have given a little tidbit about the both of you. Why don't you both take a minute and give us a deeper understanding of who you are and what you do. Sentari, let's start with you.
Oh my gosh, how far back? Very quickly, Phoenix native. I grew up here in Phoenix, Arizona, the best city on earth.
What high school?
I went to North High School. I was just going to put that in there, Tommy.
Okay.
Went to North High School, went away for college, came back, and then ultimately realized that I wanted to do something in the social impact space, so typically the nonprofit field. So I've built my career around nonprofit work and most recently joined the team, 2 years ago. So 2 years ago as of recent.
It's been that long.
It's been 2 years. Yeah, I just had my 2-year anniversary 2 weeks ago, which is crazy to me. It doesn't feel like that long at all. But took over the reins as the director of Gen Next. And the idea of the organization is that you get accomplished leaders together to galvanize around future-focused ideas. So education, economic mobility, and global security. So curating content, putting on, facilitating discussions. I had a great dinner last night with a couple of my folks on equality of opportunity. So I get to do things like that here and in San Francisco. And then last year I led the charge in Dallas. So that's me. Sitting on a lot of boards locally, and anything else you want to know, just let me know.
Cool. George.
You do a podcast too.
I also do this great podcast with George Grombacher called Figure It Out that we started the day after the election, which was more so just coincidence.
I didn't know that.
Yep,
Yeah.
the day after. And
Wow.
it was very surreal. But we've had a podcast for nearly 3 years. And we are on episode, I want to say 125. So we do it weekly. And it's probably the biggest joy in my life. Did I save it there? Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Nice. Yeah. Okay. Fantastic. Well, I grew up in northern Minnesota. I went to the Marshall School. I don't know if you're going to write that down for high school.
I'm going to write that down.
It's not as relevant as...
That was our rival.
Yeah, right, in Duluth. Also went to college in Indiana a couple years before Sentari did. I played on a tennis scholarship, so that's how I found my way there.
With your height, you played tennis?
Yeah. Thomas is talking about the fact that I'm 8 feet tall.
Why did you do this? Why did you do this?
But isn't height a disadvantage in tennis because you can't run as fast?
You know what?
I've never played tennis.
It's a good question. I think this is a strange line of conversation. No, I don't think so at all. I mean, I don't think Thomas has ever been to a basketball game.
His comment was, I've never played tennis. So
okay.
Clearly.
So anyway, for for the folks who are listening, which is everyone, because there's nobody else here watching us.
Because they just Googled awesome and this
right,
and this came up.
Yeah, I'm 6'1", so I'm fairly average. Anyway, and I'm also really not that fast, so perhaps there is something to be said for
long
that.
Arms. Yeah.
Anyway, moved down to Phoenix in 2001 after I graduated, got into finance, just sort of happened into it. Like Thomas said, it's been almost 20 years, which is kind of wild. But it is my belief that creating stronger communities really will be one of the ways that we're going to get out of this kind of funk that we've been in as a country, as a people. So that's really what I work to do, is help organizations strengthen, develop their existing communities, because I think that that's going to support individuals to get to where they want to go. So,
cool.
And yeah, Sentari and I do the weekly podcast, and it's awesome. I also do a podcast myself. I do that 5 days a week called Money Savage. It's personal finance related. So
It's insane. I don't know how he has the
I don't know
discipline,
how.
It's impressive.
Is that what you're doing at 4 a.m. when you wake up?
Yeah, and let me talk about the most important thing. I'm a married guy. I've got a 2.5-year-old son and one on the way here in October.
Ooh,
so that's
congrats.
super exciting. Thank you. My wife's a dynamo. Shout out Emily. But yeah, that's the reason I get up so early, is because if you want to get anything extra done aside from my professional work, like the podcast, that's kind of the hour that you got to make it happen at. So
I'm up at 4 a.m. too, and I agree. I get the majority of my work done between 4 and 8 a.m. every day.
Okay. Well, I'm different than the rest of you. So.
So how did you two come to meet each other in this world? What is that story?
drinking.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
drinking.
Okay.
We have a mutual friend.
Sorry, I asked.
We have a mutual friend they were all out for happy hour, and I just happened to stumble into this restaurant, and I was waiting for food. And Asher was like, just come sit down, talk to us. And I happened to sit next to this character, George. And then I was like, who is this guy? I was very fascinated. So we hit it off, and then we were like, we should grab coffee sometime. So we grabbed coffee, and then kind of the rest is history. We became fast friends, and then decided this would be good thing to do.
Yeah, the right answer was professional networking, and it was an event that was set up for professional networking. Really, sort of a handpicked group of people, just because our friend Asher thought that everybody that was there would be a good fit, and certainly Sentari is also very much like me, committed to the community, and so he's developed and cultivated a lot of really strong relationships, as I have as well. So, yeah. So it's been a couple of years now, huh?
That's great. Yeah. I love those groups that are so intentional that you get invited to through networking opportunities. And I think that's why I appreciate both of you so much, is because, I mean, Sentari, you and I, like, ever since we met, there's always a commitment to introductions and facilitated networking and that kind of stuff. And you hear people continue to say, Phoenix is the smallest big city in the world, because there's this like interconnected group of people that are so committed to things. And so that's part of the reason why I wanted to bring you guys both on the show at the same time, is not only because you are doing your own podcasts together and bringing leaders together, and super excited to hear about all that, but the connections that you've made, I think there's a commonality there in all the things we're doing.
Right.
Sentari, tell us about some of the boards that you've been able to help out over the years and things that you're doing now. I mean,
or
people
at least
that
some of the boards that you've been on.
Yeah, it's really interesting. When I moved back from college, I really wanted to get involved. So I knew I wanted to work in the nonprofit sector, but I also just volunteered a lot. And so and this is an organization I still support and still love. It's called the Welcome to America Project, which helps settle newly arrived refugees to Phoenix. So I volunteered with them like a lot. And then after a year of volunteering, they were like, hey, would you like to join our board? And I was maybe 24 or 25 at the time. I had no idea what that meant. And I was like, sure, I love the organization. I'm happy to support in any way. And so I joined that board, and that kind of just the dominoes fell. And so that's kind of where I like to engage with nonprofits. I realize that I'm not really a direct service type of person. Like going to like hand out food or read to kids is like very, very important work, but I'd much rather support the organizations from the top. So some of the organizations I've been a part of locally are like Phoenix Collegiate Academy, which is a charter school I chaired, which I loved. A great charter school in South Phoenix that was doing great work with those kiddos, getting them to and through college. I'm currently on the board of Adelante Healthcare, which is a federally qualified healthcare center, which does really provides quality access to quality care for anyone, regardless of income. And so the idea is that if you're a migrant farm worker to a business professional in Central Phoenix, you go to Adelante to get your healthcare needs taken care of. And it's one of my favorite organizations. And most recently, I joined the Goodwill of Central Arizona board of directors within like the last month. So I'm super excited for that work and really thinking through. I've felt that one of the things that I've learn more about is kind of income inequality and the power of work. So the dignity of a job, and Goodwill is really at the forefront of that. So I'm excited to engage in that work. Yeah,
that's cool. That sounds like a very different board than.
Yes. So I've been on a lot of like smaller local boards, a national board, and then Adelante was probably the first board that was for a really large organization, about a $50 or $60 million organization. And so Goodwill is going to be definitely a leap, which I'm excited and nervous about, but it should be. I mean, it's going to be great. It's such a well-run organization.
Right. And George, aren't you on their foundation board?
Yeah, I think on the same day that Sentari got voted onto their general board, I was voted onto the foundation board.
Cool.
Nice.
What's the foundation? How's that different?
Well, so just I think like Local First is structured. You have foundation, right? And they just do different things.
Okay.
So there are going to be some really exciting things that Goodwill is going to be announcing, if they haven't already, about just having a larger impact in the community coming up here. So, and the foundation will be tasked with doing the fundraising for that.
Okay. So a lot of their programmatic fundraising. And
you got it.
That's cool. Okay. Awesome. Do you serve on any other boards?
Well, I am the president of my fraternity's alumni association in Phoenix. And I wanted to, I think that Sentari, again, have sort of similar experiences. I think you said you were 23 or 24 when you got involved with that organization. They asked you to be on the board. And when I moved here from Arizona, the first thing I did was I went to my fraternity's alumni association, just find out from a networking standpoint how that would work out. And I found I met a guy, he actually hired me into the business. And so that's how I found my career. And probably 6 months into me being a part of the alumni group, they asked me to be the chapter advisor to the chapter at Arizona State. So it's sort of that impact or effect when somebody taps you on the shoulder and says, "Hey, would you help be a leader?" And I'm sure that it sounds like has kind of informed and shaped the leadership that you've had over the past however many years it's been. And I know for me, 100%. I thrive on responsibility. I thrive, and really I found that I find meaning in responsibility. And I don't know that if I hadn't had that experience, how long that it would have taken me to have that light bulb sort of flip on.
Sure.
So anyway, Goodwill to me, it's an organization that puts a lot of people to work every year. And so I like to put my time and my money where my mouth is, and talk a lot about that. I also serve on the Citizens Review Board for the Phoenix Police Department.
Oh, wow.
Man, there's a lot of tough news regarding police officers over the past decade, it seems. So anytime there's a use of force, there's a criminal proceeding to make sure that it's legal or illegal. And then once that's clear, then 3 citizens sit on an internal review.
Wow.
So do that as well. There's probably other things that I'm doing, but I think that those are the primary extracurricular activities.
So, George, one of the really interesting things that you and I have had conversations about, and I'm sure you have conversations about on your Savage Money podcast, not the one you do with Sentari, but your one on finances, is you know a lot about the financial literacy in individuals and how things have kind of developed across the country as far as individuals and their practices in saving money and their ability to save money and all those things. And one of the things that we talked about when we sat down a while ago is I had heard a report that came out not too long ago that said, something like 75% of people living in the United States have less than $1,000 in their savings account, which is, I think, a symptom of a lot of different things. But kind of interested to hear from you, from your perspective. I mean, tying together what you said when you started that, bringing community together and your background in finances, how do you kind of bridge those things through the work that you're doing and the podcast that you're running and all of that?
Yeah, well, that's essentially, that's the work that I do. That is what I spend my time mulling on and really trying to figure out. That's really what attracted me to doing what I'm doing today, is that I find it to be very intellectually interesting. And yes, fundamentally speaking, half of Americans couldn't come up with $400 in case of an emergency.
Wow.
Why is that? And sure, we didn't learn a lot of this stuff in school, but it's right at our fingertips every day, right? I can intellectually understand that I'm supposed to be saving more money than I'm spending, so on and so forth. That being said, there is an enormous gap between what I know and what I do. And this is also me. I'm a guy that's made every money mistake in the book. And fortunately, I've righted the ship, for lack of a better term. But yes, I believe that community is really a linchpin to helping people break bad habits and start good ones. And I think that we can apply this to every aspect of our lives. When you think about organizations like CrossFit, like Weight Watchers, like Alcoholics Anonymous, they don't have any real special intellectual property, right? CrossFit, you're lifting tires and doing all this other stuff. Weight Watchers, it's just the accountability piece. So I really think it's the community link where there's people around you that have been there. They want to see you do well. They're going to hold you accountable and check you when you're slipping up.
Right.
So I think that when you marry the head knowledge with then the behavioral support, that's when real change, real learning, and lasting change can really happen.
Right. And I think that's the power of practice and habits that you have to work into your life. I mean, you talk about and see people going to conferences all the time, and there's all these, really, really motivating speakers and panelists and all these things. And people go and they're inspired and they walk away, and 90% of them don't put it into practice. Right. It's just like you feel really good for a moment. My wife always tells me something that her father told her when she was a soccer player as a young child. He wouldn't say practice makes perfect. He would say perfect practice makes perfect. Right. And it is drilled into her brain because she, if you are not trying to perfectly practice something, it is not going to be a part of how you live your life. And so
that's totally right. If you pay attention to Seth Godin, and I definitely do, I think he's brilliant. He's such a great communicator. He had the top ranked online course on Udemy or Coursera or one of those. And still, like 80% of the people didn't finish. And these are people who bought the course, right?
It's like Rosetta Stone.
Yeah. So it's crazy, right? It's like I spent all this money, went to a conference. I bought this course.
Yeah.
But there's no follow through. And it's just because there's not that community around it.
Right.
You don't have a trainer. That's why it makes sense to get a trainer, hire somebody to help you with doing your meals for you, meal prep, stuff like that. Otherwise, it's just not going to happen. Right. It's like I could give you the greatest guitar in the world, but if you didn't know how to play, then it wouldn't matter, right?
Right, absolutely.
Here's this awesome thing, but it's like, okay, great, thanks.
So, Sentari, you're bringing together all of these accomplished leaders and notable people and engaging them in conversations. Do you guys ever get involved in these types of discussions about finances and the economy and things like that?
It's interesting. Well, last night it was more of a kind of a big picture esoteric discussion on just equality of opportunity. So what does it look like in the United States for people to out-earn their parents? Because that is essentially the American dream, right? Like out-earning and outliving your parents or the previous generation. And so what is the access to that currently? So we have a lot of discussions around that, but not, George and I have had this conversation about how money is like one of those things that's still kind of taboo to talk about, and it shouldn't be.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, especially people with means, have no interest in having a conversation about what that looks like. And what's interesting about the article or the report that you guys have referenced was that was like agnostic across income brackets. So even people who made $400,000 a year were in the same boat of like they don't have $1,000 in their savings account, right? So it's not that it's just a problem of financial literacy among the poor. It's that everyone's really bad at how they treat money and their relationship with money.
Sure.
It's something that I wish we would talk more about. We just don't.
Right. How interesting. Do you think that there's a role that businesses need to play in that conversation, with whether it's among each other, among their employees? What would a good business stepping up and knowing these types of things, what is their responsibility in playing a role in that?
Well, I would say, and this is kind of George's wheelhouse, but just from a macro standpoint, I think when you look at the biggest stresses or stressors of employees, it's money. So if you want a highly functioning and highly committed and highly present employee who's constantly thinking about like, how am I going to make rent tomorrow? How am I going to pay for XYZ? It's in your best interest to teach them how to work with, how to finance, how to budget, because then they will show up in a much different way. And I think that's kind of a lot of the work that George is doing with organizations.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I hesitate to say it's a responsibility. I'd say it's an enormous opportunity that every one of these organizations has.
Yeah.
And we were just talking with Catherine Alonso, shout out Catherine, a couple weeks ago, and she said, we were talking about having these kind of hard conversations about race, sex, whatever, all those sort of third rail conversations. And she said that work is really the last place that we go where we have to hang out with all kinds of different people, right? Everywhere else, we can section off and hang out with just kind of our echo chamber if that's what we're into.
Mm-hmm.
And so if it's issues about any of these really difficult topics, about equality, about race, sex, gender, about money, it's an opportunity for an organization to build a great culture where it's open, where there is diversity, and there's diversity about the things that we are talking about and that we're teaching. And it's an opportunity to create an environment. I always hate to say a safe space, but it's an opportunity to create a safe space where you can have these hard conversations.
Yeah, or to address the potential issue or the vulnerability of people around you. I saw a TED Talk recently, and the woman's name is really hard to pronounce, so I'm not going to butcher it. But her husband is, and I know how to say his name because I've said it a million times, Anand Giridharadas, who wrote the book Winners Take All. So it's his wife. And you can link to her directly by going to his Twitter account. It's, their husband and wife. And she has a great TED Talk where she addresses all these taboo topics and says, Thanksgiving dinner table and the reason why we don't talk about money, sex, politics, all these things is because we don't embrace the actual topic of the conversation in a real humane way. And she gives an example. They went into a business that was an architecture firm historically for many, many years. And they were split down the middle of people working for the firm on whether or not they were going to continue being, a frontline architecture firm or move into more of the design space, which it was a real possibility for them to do. And right down the middle of the office, kind of the younger people working there really wanted to move to this design space. The people that have been working there for a while wanted to be this architecture firm. And so they put them all in the room, and the two leading people that felt one way or the other, they cleared the room of all the tables and the chairs, and they set up essentially a mock boxing ring, and they put on Rocky music and gave them boxing gloves. And then however you felt, you were supposed to get behind the other person, root behind them and all that stuff. And then they brought them into the middle and they made them tell their sides of the story.
That's awesome.
And it was just fully embracing what they weren't talking about and didn't want to actually address. And in the end, they actually went with architecture. But I thought that was so cool for them to head on address something that they didn't want to. And not that, you would do that in an everyday business, but I thought it was a really cool example.
Well, I do think that you should have avenues for those. I think about how much of your time is speaking around something in your daily job, instead of just saying this is the issue that I'm having, let's talk about it. And I think businesses would be much better suited or well suited if folks would just tackle that directly.
Yeah, there was a story I heard in NPR a while ago about a gentleman who had high blood pressure and was at his doctor's office. And the doctor said, "How can we get you to lower your high blood pressure?" And he said, "If you could help me lower my water bill or help me pay my water bill."
that would be awesome.
Right. But or tools to help him to be able to afford that or tackle that. Right. And all these symptoms of those things come about because of it. So really interesting.
Yeah. Well, again, I think it's just a huge opportunity that, I think the reason that it doesn't work so well at Thanksgiving dinner when you just start having these conversations is because everybody's not agreed to sit down at the table and put the boxing gloves on, right? Yeah. Everybody's not on the same page and they haven't necessarily thought about the things that you're going to be talking about. So it's not fair. Uncle or auntie so-and-so had a couple beers or whatever, and now they are very interested in talking about it. And the other person's not at all. But if you are in a business environment where you say, hey, this is a really important thing. We want to talk about community involvement and volunteering. So we're going to have this opportunity to do a walk or a habitat build or whatever. And you bring people together. Or if it's a matter of we're having conflicts about this, that, and the other thing, and people are being a little too aggressive with email. So we're going to bring somebody in and talk about the tone with which we communicate. Well, then it's a totally different thing. So it's just this huge opportunity.
Yeah.
But you need to be intentional about it. It's not going to happen on its own.
Right. Thinking through beyond like just a business, but we're in the age of transparency where we know consumers want to know everything about the business that they're spending their money at. Employees want to work for a purpose-driven organization or a company. It doesn't matter if they're nonprofit or for-profit. We are in a time of knowing pretty much how everyone feels about politics and and everything at all times. What is the role leadership should play in this time? I guess kind of in general, and Sentari, I think that's more along the lines of what you're trying to do. But from both of you or either of you, how do you feel leadership should really be developing in these times with, the age of transparency and all these things happening?
Right. So Edelman Trust had a report that came out, probably like last October, that talks about consumers, employees, stakeholders, just say stakeholders, are really, really drawn to, or rather demanding that not only the companies that they work for or buy from, but the actual leaders, the C-suite, are folks that are politically engaged, whatever that might look like, civically minded and philanthropically engaged. And so folks are really, really want to make sure that the CEO of, I don't know, insert company here is not only preaching CSR, so corporate social responsibility, but that person themselves is very politically engaged, so understands like what the current social climate looks like and how they will react to it personally and how they will then drive the company. And then also what they're doing to kind of give back in the community. And so I think there is definitely, whether leaders like it or not, that is now the next phase of what leadership is going to look like. The work that we do at GenNext is kind of be kind of Sherpas for these folks who run big companies to say, like, these are the guardrails and these are the things we can provide you. And we give you kind of a way and an outlet to understand politics, understand philanthropy, understand civic engagement. But I think there has to be more organizations like GenNext out there to help folks kind of figure out what does that look like. Because to your point, every person now looks at like, all right, how does this company treat its workers, right? Like that's a big thing for people to. That's a huge shift from decades ago where it's just the best ad wins. And now people are actually researching. To your point, everything's transparent. And so now leaders of those companies are going to have to be more thoughtful about how they engage in the world and how their companies engage in the world.
Yeah. So what leaders are doing a good job? Because I think that we are seeing right through the companies that for years and years have had a tab on their website that lists a few companies that they give charitably to, or shows a few pictures of their staff volunteering a few times a year. And not to say that those things aren't generous or not good. Those are good things. But we're talking about the very makeup of a business and its role in society, rather than what is your afterthought that you're contributing back to once, you've made your money.
Yeah.
What companies or leaders do you see doing a good job in that aspect?
That's a really good
Or George,
question.
if you have any.
George,
Well, I think it's a really good question for sure. And I think it's an important one. And I'll try to come up with a good one right now. But that being said, I think it's also difficult unless you're actually inside the organization to know if they're actually doing the work and that's actual culture.
Sure.
Or if it's just BSing and jobbing some kind of a survey to get your name on the best places to work kind of a thing. And we're such a great company and we're doing all this great stuff. So I don't know the answer to that. I'm sure that there's a lot.
Yeah, I can't think of anyone just like off the top of my head or a company or a brand, which probably says something, right? Like you hear the big things like Nike comes out about Colin Kaepernick or whatever that might look like, or insert big brand. But I think other than the huge brands doing things, which I think I would say personally, I think their strategy, there's clear need for someone to kind of guide that strategy. Yeah. And I'm glad that they're very transparent about what they believe in. But I think more and more companies are now going to have to figure out like what is our policy agenda, or what is our civic engagement agenda, and then really align to that instead of being so reactionary. But again, I don't think there's any, like that's the only company I can think of that's even.
Yeah, I think it is interesting that, it is sometimes difficult to think, okay, what is that big brand? But that's the reason that we started the Arizona Good Business Summit this year, was that we wanted to not only first tell stories about businesses in Arizona that are taking the steps to be those good businesses that are here, and we've got a lot of them, but also challenge more businesses to think creatively and innovatively about how they can do that too. And so we brought out Kim Jordan from New Belgium Brewing, who a lot of people don't know, but if you go onto their website or if you're familiar with the company, you do, that they are heavily invested in creating an environment for their employees that's really, really healthy and good. They're the largest employee-owned company in the country. They're in their benefit corporation. So after you get hired by New Belgium, you literally get a card and it says owner. You are an owner in the business.
Wow.
They position, they have 2 headquarters, one in Fort Collins and then I think one in North Carolina somewhere.
Asheville.
Yeah, Asheville. And they positioned them in areas in those communities that are really bikeable. And they give everybody that works there a bike because they find that, if you're biking to work, you're going to be a lot happier than, if you're sitting in a car for 30 minutes through rush hour.
That's got to be true.
But yeah, so it's really interesting and cool to see businesses that are investing in those types of things that, you may not know if you're at the store and just buying one of their beers, but when you really look deep into the country, they've got it,
Right.
really worked into.
That's really good treatment of employees. That's amazing.
Yeah.
And I really like what Sentari said because it certainly does make sense. It's a tough environment for all of us to be living in when you can experience such backlash immediately and then get dogpiled on Twitter or whatever. So when you look at organizations like Nike, and then you look at the response of Governor Ducey, whether you think that either was right or wrong, I think it's interesting. It's also interesting how Starbucks has been responding and reacting. And I think that the more every individual can do and every CEO or president or leader of an organization can work that stuff out and have really clarity and here's what we believe in, here's the things we're going to invest time in, then it's easier to weather those storms or to be able to respond when those kind of blips on the radar pop up.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, George, you're well-versed and involved in an industry that a lot of people would say is a corrupt industry of finances in our country.
What?
Weird.
Unbelievable.
How are you disrupting that industry through what you're doing?
Yeah. I 100% agree with that. I think that my industry, and I'll lump personal finance in with banking and everything else, and that makes it probably one of the largest industries, is got to be one of the most distrusted, and for good reason. A lot of the BS that company's been pulling for a long time. One of the reasons that I became attracted to working in the retirement plan space, which is probably 6, 7, 8 years ago, is because it was clear as mud how much stuff cost. You just had no idea how much the financial company was making. What do my investments cost? What is the financial advisor person? How much money do they make? And thankfully, there's been a lot of changes. And so there's more transparency in that industry as well. But we continue to see more and more disruption with technology, things like financial technology or fintech, robo-advisors absolutely driving the cost of what used to be very, very expensive and very, very exclusive. Like, how do I get professional investment management? Well, now anybody can have access to it with very little money to have to deposit into an account and then very, very low ongoing fees and expenses. And so that's an incredible thing. My model for the way that I offer help and support to organizations and individuals, I leverage software. And then I leverage financial technology as well. And so that's how I'm doing my part. But again, I think that it comes down to the community piece on it. And I'm going to keep beating that drum because without that, the rest of it doesn't matter.
Right.
That's good.
Right. So in working in that field and doing that, do you think it's the community within the business that, people that may be using the software needs to be built within the business, or is it the community that I need to personally build myself with the people that I know in my network? What does that mean?
Yeah. So one of the questions that I forgot to answer a minute ago is what's the leadership's responsibility or opportunity for driving this change? And I think that from my perspective with organizational leadership, it's 9 times out of 10 going to be from the top down. So the leader of the organization is going to drive it. So if they're interested in financial literacy, well, then the organization is probably going to be pretty successful with financial literacy. You look at like why Goodman's Interior is so successful. Well, Adam he's a guy who's so active in the community, right? So I think there's a perfect example of a company that's doing it the right way. So if you have a leader who is more hands off, well, then I don't think the culture is going to be great. But if you have a Kim Jordan who is fully committed with New Belgium, another great example you brought up, well, I think that they probably have a successful culture wherever they choose. I bet that they have a great volunteering culture. I bet that they probably have great financial literacy and everything else. So I think it starts at the top.
Cool. Centauri, what is something that you wish people knew, whether it's about the work that you do or what you've learned over the years through the people that you've come across or the boards that you've served on?
Ooh, that's a great question. I think that one thing I wish people would embrace is the idea that you don't have to be a multimillionaire to affect change. And so a through line in our podcast has been how many folks have said, if you really want to make an impact, think about your local politics, right? So the things that are going to affect you the most happen at the city council level, right? And most people are not paying attention to those races because they're like, well, I vote in the presidential race or maybe the Senate race, and that's all I really need, when really it's the local piece. And you have a direct line to those people. So it would be embracing local politics and being fully engaged in those races and understanding what that means and actually just understanding how your local government works, because that's what's going to affect most of your life. And then 2, to the original point, it's if you want to give back, you don't have to give back in large amounts to be impactful. So even if it's, $10, there are a couple of organizations I just give $10 a month to, right? And that's where my capacity is. And they certainly need that type of support. So you don't have to have big checks to really help organizations, but also I wish more people would think about what they're passionate about and then deploy that passion. And so I think one of the things that was really eye-opening for me and George, it's like, we thought about doing a podcast and then we're just gonna do it. Right. And so many people, I have so many friends that, I mean, they're well-meaning, but they have so many things where like, I can't because. And it's like, well, just give it a try. Just start it. Like maybe it won't work out, but just do it. And I wish more people would just say, all right, I'm going to do this. And if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. But I'm going to actually put the momentum in place to make it happen. So those would be some of the things that I would put together.
Right. Yeah. We channel, they're not I wouldn't say the three of us do this, but there's a lot of people that channel so much emotion and energy into social media and use that as their outlet for their, whether it's anguish or, feelings about anything going on. It doesn't matter what side you're on. And we've been talking about this internally at Local First a lot. Like, how can we continue to make people feel that they are creating change all the time? Because that's really what our organization was built to do, was whether for the first time ever, you're going to a local coffee shop, like you're a change maker because you decided, and I'm not looking at the Starbucks cup that's in front of George because he brought a Starbucks today. I'm going to call him out for it. But because you made the choice to support a business in the community, you're a change maker. Like, and you should know that those dollars going to that business are going to make more of an impact, right? Or, if you're going to get involved in anything locally, even further than city council, do you have a neighborhood association? And is it active? Are you going
HOA?
To the meetings?
That's where you need to be.
Right.
Jeez.
Or, do you care about education? Who's on your school board? Right. And don't just go down and holler at them and, yell at them about what you feel, but create a relationship with them and get to know them. And that's where most things are going to impact you.
And I don't want this to come off as preachy, but I do think there's the social media comment reminded me of this. There's so many folks who I've interacted with that are like, I don't have half an hour to read like articles every day, right? Or I don't have half an hour to volunteer. I don't have half an hour to take up a new hobby. And it's like, well, if you really value it, and we talked about this with Catherine Alonso, if that's something that you value and you really want to do, you will make the time. Like you'll figure out half an hour to an hour in your day to work out, to read, to learn about your local city council, to join an HOA. And so that would be another thing. It's like, if you think about what you value and then actually put the time and energy behind it.
Yeah. Power practice.
Intentionality, I think, is everything in that. So, yeah. Right now everybody's getting their butt kicked pretty much by social media. If you are not if you are not viewing the world through the lens of your personal values, then you're viewing the world through the lens of other people's values. And it's marketers and solicitors that are working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they have way deeper pockets than you do. And if you think that you're not affected by it, you are wrong.
A few things we did recently to kind of work in this space. We hosted a how to communicate to your local policymakers event. So we brought together
That's awesome.
a couple city council members, a state representative, and just went to a brewery and had a facilitated conversation of them sharing what's useful ways to get in touch with them and ways that you can know what's going on within those aspects of things and how to best communicate with people that are in office to just kind of enable our followers and the people that are close to us not to think one way or the other, but to know that, this is how you can create change, or this is how you can be involved. Another thing we're thinking about doing is, could there be a way that if you walk into a local business, you could register to vote or, just get information about different things. So just ways that, again, you can impact change locally, I think is most impactful.
I think so many folks are, and I bet I would especially venture on the business side. There's a political kind of pundit. His name's Matt Lewis, and he talks about something that's resonated with me for years, which is you may not care about politics, but politics care about you. And so I think so many businesses, especially CEOs and business owners, are like, I just don't want to touch it. Like, I have an opinion on these things, but I will never voice it. I will never air it because of what we were talking about earlier. Everything's transparent. But why not? Like, in a nonpartisan way, I think it would be great for businesses to say, like, this is how you register to vote. I don't care how you're voting, but you should be involved in the civic process. And I think that is something that's very much lacking. It's this idea that you have to keep those things separate. But if it's something that consumes a big part of your life, why aren't we talking about it more?
Right.
And everything is right at your fingertips, what you're talking about. Everything is right at your fingertips. If you approach an elected official in a respectful manner, you will hear back from them. You can get an audience with them. And that's, I think, at probably any level locally and probably even nationally. When I was in D.C. a couple of years ago, I went and saw Senator Flake. And it's not because I'm a donor, because I've never given him any money. I reached out and I asked. So it's all right at your fingertips.
They're all people.
They're all human beings. Some of them might be aliens.
Oh, are you registered for the Area 51?
That is so hilarious. It's so fun to watch on. Oh my gosh.
Saturday night, it was the end of my wife's work week and she's asleep on the couch and I'm sitting there in tears. In actual tears, looking at Twitter, and
it's nuts.
I think there's like 2.1 million people saying they're going to storm the gates of Area 51 on September 20th. It is an interesting time to be alive.
It is such an interesting time, and there's so many things in the world that give me hope for humanity, and then there's things like that. We are effed.
But then there's things like Chuck Norris and Keanu Reeves who say they're going. So.
Keanu Reeves said he was going.
Yeah. I mean, that's not shocking on either. Either one of those.
Chuck Norris is there now.
Not shocking.
Oh wow. Okay, so kind of pulling things together. If there's one thing that you could say that both of you that drives you, or that you're passionate about, and why you do your work, what would you say that is?
Yeah. Well, I think that Sentari and I. Again, one of the through lines for everything we hear about it in the podcast is being active, being engaged, being involved, and how it is within your control to do that, to have an impact. And the best place to do that and the best place to start is just doing the work on your own. And then in so doing that, you'll increase the work or the impact that you have in your family and your community through your work. So I don't think I answered the question necessarily. What was the question?
It sounded good.
It sounded really good.
Thank you.
You should have just stopped.
Yeah, I should have. Shoot.
It would have just worked. For me, I would say it's, when we were talking to Catherine Alonso on her podcast, it was something that I've reflected on for a number of years. And my passion is helping people and stewarding folks, figuring out what they're passionate about, and then connecting them to the tools to get there. So what drives me every day, and I'm very fortunate to have a job where that is what I get to do, is like meeting with folks and figuring out like, what is the impact that you want to make in the world? What is the legacy that you want to leave? And then how can I help you get to those goals? And that's something that's I love both professionally and then just being in the community and sitting down with folks and organizations and saying, all right, you're doing great work. what do you need to get to that next level? How can we build a capacity within you and your organization? And that's really what keeps me going.
Love it. Cool. So Sentari, George, both were at our Arizona Good Business Summit in 2019. Hope to see you both in 2020. Can you both let our listeners know how to find you online?
Yeah, you can find me at georgegrombacher.com. You can also find me at moneyalignmentacademy.com and all those wonderful social media channels I am present on.
So before you go, Sentari, at what point in your career do you get to where you say, you know what, I need to have my own website with my full name?
Yeah, I don't think it's a point in my career. I just think that either you reach a level of immaturity or maturity, or the ego grows out of control that says, you know what I better do is reserve my own domain. And you know what would be a really good idea is if I actually put a site up.
Yeah, there you go.
So there's not that's going to be different for everybody. I actually own SentariMinor.com. And I've been working on a site. I don't know exactly what the content's going to be. I've got some pretty good ideas.
That must be an expensive annual fee.
No, it's like $13. Sentari's super nervous right now.
No, I'm like super nervous. We were talking about this a couple of weeks ago. How many folks are now, when their kids are born, they're signing them up for an email address, like getting a Gmail with their full name, which I think is actually pretty smart.
It's actually pretty smart.
You should probably do that.
I cannot get Thomas Barr or Thomas L. Barr or anything. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
And for me, you can find me actually at SentariMinor.com. George does not own it. From what I know, I guess that's who I've been paying. And on any social, I think I'm the only Sentari Minor in the world, so it's really easy to find me.
That is so cool.
Yeah, it's fun.
You know, if you Google Thomas Barr, you know what comes up?
Oh, this should be good.
An Irish Olympic runner.
That's pretty awesome.
Like incredibly successful. And he only became successful like 3 years ago.
Darn
because you used to type in Thomas Barr and I would come up.
But now you're the second
anymore.
most famous.
You've got to type in Thomas Barr Phoenix or Arizona. And I'm just like, my SEO rankings shut down. So I'm going to start entering awesome into all the things I'm doing, and maybe I'll pop up there. We'll see.
It'll be you.
It's worth a shot.
Well, thank you, Sentari and George, for being here today. We hope you listening were inspired today by these local leaders that are redefining what it means to do good business. We'd like to thank our sponsors, Conscious Capitalism of Arizona, Max 6, and Phoenix Business Radio X. This is Thomas Barr from Local First AZ, reminding you that if we want to build a better Arizona, we need to connect deeply with the local businesses that make us proud to call this place home.